What's going on, everybody? I thought I might do a little video today about making a sandbox campaign. Oh, where's my pretty face? There I am. Let's move this back real quick. There we go. Yes. Anyways, today I wanted to create a little video about creating a sandbox campaign and the types of things you would need to get started. A sandbox campaign, if you didn't already know, is essentially a campaign setting in which your players are free to do whatever they like. Kind of like an MMORPG, where they can come into a world and they can interact with whatever they want, and there's usually going to be answers for all that. Obviously, it's easy to do it in a video game because the programming of the video game and the design creates the constraints in which they can operate their characters. But when you're doing with D&D, it can be a little more difficult because you may not necessarily have all the prep done. And even then, if you do it unless you're doing it like totally theater of mind, it can be kind of hard to like drop in the pieces that you need right away to make it seem more immersive and fun, especially if you're going to use a platform like Roll20. The best examples currently of sandbox campaigns, in my opinion, are going to be the Curse of Strahd module, which I'm going to break down today and kind of show you the different elements that go into it that make it sandboxy. Tomb of Annihilation, because it's a very Hex Crawl kind of adventure where you can play around in the peninsula of Chult. There's also Storm King's Thunder, where you get to wander around the northern Sword Coast. And finally, I'd say that Out of the Abyss kind of has that, since you can go to different places in the Underdark and kind of adventure around. And there's some more that kind of have a little bit elements of it, but I think those are the strongest ones. Curse of Strahd, of course, is a very popular module. If you're not familiar with it, it is Wizards of the Coast's gothic horror adventure setting, and it's pretty cool. Like, it has a lot of good things going for it, which I'm going to break into today. In order to totally set the tone for this, I'm going to play some music by Mr. Michael Gelfi, and who's written some really cool music themes. Michael Gelfi, we'll just say Undead. Yeah, make sure to follow his stuff. It's really cool. And he's got a Patreon too, which I highly recommend supporting. Apparently doesn't want to capture my music today. So we may not have any music. I'll have to get Frosty to cut this part out. Let's see. Anyways. Alright, let's take a look at Strahd and all the elements that go into making it. Of course, I've got both the book version here as well as the Roll20. I think they're both like $30, like $30 on Amazon, which is $20 off its price, like MSRP. So you can get it like $30 on Amazon, or you could get it for $30 on the Roll20 marketplace. I've already purchased it and loaded it up. It's pretty simple. You just pay for it, and then you can just start up a module with it. I haven't run this for anybody yet, so this is totally fresh out of the box playstyle. All right. So let's take a look at the things that make this game a sandbox and how the pieces are related to each other. And a lot of this is going to have to do with something I like to call information architecture. Essentially, what they've done is set up a web, if you will, of interrelated content pieces that can connect to each other. If this was done through a video game, it would be like an example of, like, you start in a map. Take like an old Final Fantasy game, right? You have the overland map. You may be limited to where you can go. You can't go past mountains and stuff like that. And then if you go into a town, it immediately brings you somewhere else. And this is essentially what you have to do when you deal with a D&D module, especially if you're using something like Roll20, because you're going to be in charge of what your players are seeing during the game. All right, so it'll start you at the landing page, which has, this is kind of like, and this isn't important, this is just a kind of a nice feature, but the point of the landing page here is to set the tone for one. This is a really good place to throw in music too. Like if you want to put in like some cool atmospheric music in the game, you can have a song play on load and it would automatically get it. I really like this, especially if you've got kind of a waiting room set up and you can throw people in there. Again, it's really not important for setting up your own campaign just yet to have that, but it's a nice little tonal touch that they can do. They've given us a random battle map where if you have like a fight that's going to take place outside of like one of the maps, like say it's a theater of mind kind of setting or like stuff, you could do that. So that's a nice touch too. I would argue it's probably better to have like different environments and stuff set up like that. And of course you could purchase those through the Roll20 marketplace, get stuff like forest settings, like a road, maybe some streets in a town or a city or something. But still, it's nice to have this battle map. So if you have assets, you can like go ahead and plug them in. All right, so when you really start thinking about building your sandbox style game, is you want to have the first major piece, which is going to be your overland map. And this is kind of where you want to start with it. And this overland map example, this art is done by Mike Schley, who I don't know if he's doing as much now for Wizards, but he was pretty much like their original designer coming into it. I think he still does a lot of the regional maps for them, but I believe that a lot of the zoomed in maps are going to be done by Dyson Logos these days. It just depends on the book to book. But here you can see we've got Barovia. It is actually a little bit smaller than provincial scale, so you have 3 major scales in D&D. Now, granted, you've got infinite number of scales, but the 3 main scales that they talk about in the Dungeon Master's Guide, I believe in Chapter 1, is you have Province scale, which is roughly 1 hex equals 1 mile. They have Kingdom scale, which is 1 hex equals 6 miles. So if you've played the Lost Mines of Phandelver, for example, that's done at Kingdom scale for the Phandelver map. Every hex is going to be about 6 miles, and you can move 4 hexes per day. On a map like this, is at 1/4, so you can move up to 90-something hexes a day. So pretty much anywhere you want to get to in the Barovia map, you can get to in 1 day without too much trouble. And also, Tomb of Annihilation is pretty close to Kingdom scale. It's at 10 miles per hex. That's meant just to simplify based on those particular Hex Crawl rules, which are going to be different than those presented in the Player's Handbook of DMG. And finally, you have Continental scale, where 1 hex is going to equal 60 miles. And that's for like very large travel, because 60, unless they're going really, really fast, stuff at that scale is really not meant for overland travel, because the average party is only going to be able to move on foot or horse about 24 miles per day at a normal pace. That's more for getting a view of like their like regional conflicts, how the countries kind of fit together. I would say like your big maps of Faerun, however you want to pronounce it, would be at that scale, where you can kind of see like all the little stuff, and then you can have like teleportation or just montage style travel. But if you want to do actual hex crawl, which I personally enjoy doing because I think it makes things interesting, and it's a great way to start things out, especially with lower tier groups. You start with a map kind of like this Barovia map, where you are going to be around 1 hex equals 1 mile. Okay, so we've got this, and you can see that there's all these letters here. Each one of these letters equals a place of interest that is going to be fully fleshed out by the book. They've also done us a favor and added some tokens, mostly for random encounters. I believe like right off the start, you're supposed to be attacked by like 5 dire wolves to kind of get that feel for the adventure. You could see Barovia Village, and this is all like organized, like this is intentional organization. Like they want you to start here at A, like right here, and then they want you to like follow this path and go to Barovia. So right away you get like, oh, this is what this campaign's about. What's this scary place? Then you go to Barovia, which is going to be your first major adventure setting. They want you to see the bad guy's lair, you want to have that looming threat over you. So that's what this is. K right there is the Castle Ravenloft, which is where our big villain, Mr. Strahd himself, lives and, poots around. And then the big part of the adventure comes when I think you get to there's crossroads where you meet a bunch of gypsies and they read your fortune, and then you kind of find, I think it's right here in this gypsy camp, you kind of like figure out all of your quests. So the way Strahd is organized, and this isn't important for your sandbox, but it's important to understand how the game's organized, is that it's very much a fetch quest, which turns into beat the bad guy kind of thing. So the goal is to get out of Ravenloft. The only way to do that is to beat Strahd. In order to beat Strahd, you have to get 3 artifacts of power, find where he's at, and team up with an NPC or a non-player character somewhere in the game to do it. You find this out by having your tarot card reading here, or Karoka as they call it in the game, card reading at this little camp here. They tell you where A, B, and C are based on random rolls. So ultimately there's like literally millions of different ways that this game could go. They tell you where in the castle to find them, and they tell you who you need to team up with. So a big part of this campaign is going to be, you're really getting the campaign introduction, like, here. You show up, you fight the wolves to get the feel and the tone of the game. You go to the village to get your first major hooks and cross the threshold, as they call it. And a big part of that too, crossing the threshold, is going to be meeting the gypsy, the Vistani, who are going to tell you, okay, you need to go get the Sun Sword is over at this place and this. And then the whole remainder of this map is going to be where all these fetch quests can be. And it becomes like a mission of like finding clues to get to the items. Like say the sword is over here at Y, or it's I think there's like a Book of Strahd. I can't remember. I don't remember all the details. But it's pretty, it's pretty nifty. I mean, that's really what you need to think about. It's less about story and it's more about the organization structure of the information that's being presented and how it's being presented. And it creates the illusion that it is a sandbox when in reality it's only a game that's got 26 levels, or it's just a dungeon laid out weird. If you want to think about it like that, it's no different than any other dungeon. It just so happens that this looks like a map, and the areas of the dungeon, the levels of the dungeons aren't levels, but they're a town or a village or the Castle Ravenloft or, the Amber Fortress or whatever. Okay, so that's pretty much the basic setups. When you're setting up a sandbox, I would say even before you have adventure hooks and bad guys and things like that, you're going to need some pretty basic elements. First, you want to have the map itself. Second, you want to have a base of operations. In this case, it starts off being the village Barovia. Arguably, it ends up turning into the town of Valakai, which is a little bit larger and has more interesting places. And then you want at least one point of interest right away, a place that they can explore and check out. Whether it's within one of these areas of interest where maybe it's a few miles away, such as the case with Castle Ravenloft, or however it's accessed. So in this case, if we were to like strip this down, we were to take away all the fetch questy stuff and make it just 3 locations that you needed for the game, I would say the most basic parts would be the overland map. And even then you can probably I would say that comes last. You have the village of Barovia. Now this is important because this is your base of operations. It's where you get your quest hooks. It's where you get your gear. It's where the party can rest. They can find rumors and gossip. Everything they need is going to be kind of in that place. It sets the tone. Base of operations is very important. So I would say at minimum on your map, have some sort of base of operations. Typically it's going to be a village or town, but it could also be something that's like a hunting lodge, or it could be like a cave where a bunch of druids live. Wherever it is, it needs to have the elements that your characters need to figure out where they need to go and what they need to do. Okay. The next piece that you have, so you got the map, your base of operations is your point of interest or your adventure site, the place that they go away from their safe zone to explore. Obviously, you want to have as many options as possible, but I think try to limit your options as not to overwhelm them. And like at first, so take like Lost Mines of Phandelver. The tone of the adventure is set and if you're not familiar with it, I'll kind of explain it. Tone of the adventure is set with the first adventure, Goblin Arrows, where goblins attack you on the trail. You actually go up to the one of the adventure sites first, which is going to be Cragmaw Hideout, which is a series of like caves with like 6 to 8 areas or something like that. That kind of introduces the plot and like there's something going on with these goblins. Then you've got your Fandelver, which becomes your base of operations for the rest of the game, and everything you do from then on comes from Fandelver. You know, you go up to that town, I can't remember the name of it, the one with the green dragon in it that's in ruins, or you can go to into the forest and find the Circle of Stones, or you can go to Cragmaw Castle, where you fight the more Cragmaws, and then eventually you end up in the BBEG layer, or Big Bad Evil Guy layer, Big Bad Evil Guy, Gal, Binary Pal layer, where you fight the boss and win the game. Same thing, exactly same thing with this. It's going to be the same thing with Storm King's Thunder. It's going to be the same thing with everything. It's just the only difference is the graphical layout of it, but the pieces fit together the same way. So in this case, the Village of Barovia, depending on how you're playing the game, your first major point of interest. And let's take a look at Barovia. So if I was on the Barovia overland map, and I've got characters who are wandering around. Let's see. We'll do my buddy Derek the Drow. It'll take a second to load. I love Hex Crawl. Hex Crawl is really awesome, and I'll show you some cool tricks for that. Waiting on you to load. There we go. All right. So here's our buddy Derek the Drow. Here's kind of a cool idea you can do for Hex Crawl. If you want meters, what on earth? If you want to kind of hide. Oh, it's miles. Okay, that's funny. So if we wanted to, dynamic lighting is not on. This is probably not important to do, but I just kind of want to show you this. This is what I do with kind of a cool trick. Is you can see that Derek now can only see real basic area. Let's give him bright light. All right, so he's got a bright light bubble. So what I've done is now I've made it the whole map dark to my players. And this is not necessary. This is a little bit more advanced, but I kind of just wanted to show this off because it's kind of a neat trick. And you can see as he's moving around. Oops. One more setting I need to put on. All tokens reveal. All right, so as he's moving around, it's revealing different parts of the map. So you don't only have to do this for dungeons. So this way, they can kind of go to places they remember it, but they don't know that there's, this is his vision, not my vision. My vision is like, oh, there's a castle over here. But as far as he knows, this is just, whoa, this place is so creepy. Oh my goodness, what's this road? I'm gonna follow this road. There's a little town here. All right, pretty cool. All right, so Derek the Drow finds a town of Barovia. Once they go there, ends up going into the village. And you can do the same story here. They can wander around the village, or you can just leave the big map. They've got more places to explore. So they've gone from a big macro scale, shrinking down to a smaller scale here, where there are 7 locations built into it. 1, 2, you can kind of see them on the GM layer. And this. So we can ignore, let's keep things simple. So in the village of Barovia, there are 7 places that can check out. Now, only 2 of these places are actually built out a little bit more. You're going to have the chapel here, which has its own map, the church. And the second one is going to be the Death House, which is your first major adventure site. Now, if you play it, if you can skip this one and use something else, but this, like, if you're starting with level 1 characters, this is going to be like the first major adventure that they have, introduces them to the roles of that. So if we went there, our scale shrinks down even more into this adventure site here, wherein they start on the first floor and they travel through, and then this is going to be their major dungeon. So they can go in, they can leave, they can come back. There's 4 levels to this with 2 separate maps, and yeah, I mean, there's enough experience here to go from level 1 to level 5, and some pretty grisly encounters too. This thing's a player killer, or character killer for sure. So let's reiterate here, okay? So we got our big overland map, 26 different locations, A to Z. Shrinks down into our village of Barovia, which has another 7 locations in which they can check out, some of which are just going to be like a paragraph and some notes. Others are going to be like the Death House, in which they can explore a little bit more detailed. And really, that's all you need is the big map. You're going to need your base of operations, and you need at least 1 adventure site. You have those 3 elements. Boom, that's all I need. Arguably, you could probably even get rid of the big map. And you, like a lot of the old school games, like if you've read Tales from the Yawning Portal, right? It has a lot of old school designs in it, which are essentially like, you're in this town, some guy in a cloak said, go over here and punch that giant in the face, and here's the giant map. There was nothing else. Like, you didn't really need the town. The whole thing could be virtual. You just have enough details about it. Oh, it's an old mining town, and there's this kooky old man who, whistles too much, or and then you show up, and then you go through. Then, and if you do the Yawning Portal's nothing but that. It's just like, here's the details, here's the hook. Go get him, Tiger, and you just go straight to the map. That's a very old school style. Nowadays, there's a little bit more thought put into it. So, but at the very least, if you're gonna have anything, have your adventure, at least 1 adventure site. If you're gonna expand it and start building out a sandbox, you're going to need to have your base of operations, you're going to need a map, and you're going to need the adventure site itself. From there, you start expanding around it, giving them different options. And this is this design is this is nothing new. This design style has been around for years, since the dawn of video games, right? Video games understood it. Video games may have arguably taken it from RPGs, since RPGs came before like major video games, where even like something like Super Mario World for the Super Nintendo, right? You had the big overland map. You moved to location to location. You went into different locations. Each location had different levels. You fought the boss. You always kind of knew there was that looming threat in the distance of like the Castle Ravenloft. One day I'm going to go there and I'm going to beat up that guy. It's the same deal, whatever you do. Over the next coming weeks, I'm going to be developing some assets of my own, starting with, we've got an overland map that's going to be coming, that will come with a really basic town. Like, I'm talking about a town with an inn, and, it has stuff, but they're all in like paragraph blocks, and then we're going to have an adventure site. So look forward to this product, and kind of the release is built around that, where we're going to be setting it up so that you can take your own sandbox and create your own sandbox with an overland map, with the individual like pieces that you want to put into it, and then kind of create a flexible adventure. So like if you need an inn, like boom, we've got an inn set up. It's already got all the dynamic lighting done. It's already got all of the people put in. It's got everything that you need to get started, like hooks and things like that. And then you can customize it from there. So this is what we're going to be working on with DMDave and all the people that I've got on my awesome staff. So anyways, I hope this is informative. Like I said, pretty simple stuff. If you want to get started on Roll20, all you really need, I would start with your adventure location first, find a basic map, throw in some tokens, throw in some dynamic lighting, call it a day. That's really all you need for an adventure. Once you start expanding from there, it just becomes a matter of adding a base of operations, a map, and then creating new additional stuff. You'll see in a good design like this, you've got the BBEG layer, which is going to be, just a gargantuan-sized dungeon. You've got a secondary base of operations, and you'll see a lot of that in common designs. You go from like your first base of operations, which is really simple, has all the basic necessities, but eventually your characters outgrow it. They need some magic items, so you have your secondary base of operations. In this case, you've got Valakai in Barovia, Phandelver, you've got Neverwinter up north. They're all going to have kind of similar styles to that. There's always like a other place that you can go. Sometimes you just start in the big place, like Waterdeep Adventures. Like, boom, you're in Waterdeep. You really don't need to go anywhere else, right? Um, and then so on and so forth. And you can see like Valakai has multiple. I actually took it upon myself to break it all down. Exactly all the parts that go into Ravenloft. So this is actually the Curse of Strahd adventure, broken down into all of its pieces. This is all 26 locations on the Barovia map. I mark whether or not it has its own map, which means if it has its own map, it's going to be more than that. If it doesn't, it's typically going to be no more than, a half page of content written about that area, maybe an encounter that doesn't have its own map. You can see the village Barovia here has its own 7 areas. I call it a small settlement because it's not outwardly hostile. Barovia is kind of like, ooh, it's gothic horror, but still, it's like a place that you can chill out. You got points of interest within. So the church and the death house itself is a dungeon, meaning it's going to be outwardly hostile to the characters. I'd say point of interest in my terminology is going to be places that are kind of neutral or may not necessarily mean there's encounters. It's just has a bit more going on than just a text block. You can see Castle Ravenloft is your big finale piece. 88 different areas, huge dungeon. Actually, more than 88 because all the tombs have their own numerology. Probably got close to 100, 120 places. You can see Valakai is another settlement with 5 expanded areas, so it definitely starts taking over. And each one of these are points of interest and dungeons that it's got within it. And you've got a secondary dungeon in this module, the Argenvostolt, and also the Amber Temple, which are so the Argenvostolt is the one that's going to be like the where you fight the specters, I think, sword wraiths or whatever they're called. And then you've got the Amber Temple, which is like weird cultist stuff. So really, really cool, like structure, lots of fun things to do. Big dungeons, this is what makes a good campaign. And really, once you learn how to assemble all these pieces, it's just as simple as like purchasing it, loading it up, and like rolling with it. And when you can do this kind of thing and you have the right assets, which we're hoping to create, you can make it seem like you're an awesome GM that can create any, like if your people get captured and they got to do a jailbreak, boom, we've got a garrison set up that we can throw at you with tokens in place that has rules for breaking out of the dungeon, like all this stuff to make it flexible. So anyways, I hope this was helpful for you. I'm going to be following up more on this series over the next coming week using Roll20 and kind of showing you how that me and my staff are designing this thing. And if you got any questions, hit me up here on the Facebook or hit me up on Discord. Anyways, thanks everybody.